Hi, Shauravi. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Joanna. It's so nice to be here with you today. Hugo, thanks for having both of us. And thank you to anybody who joined in to listen. Um, and if you're somebody who's thinking about starting out in millets or any other sort of related food business or field or want to be an entrepreneur like Joanna, thank you for listening to both of us and feel free to ask us your questions. I thought I'd start off by introducing Joanna, actually. It's really life comes full circle sometimes because I first met Joanna about 6 years ago when we started Slurpp Farm, and no one at the time talked about millets. And everybody, there were a few names, there were 4 or 5 different names. People would always say, you must speak to so and so, so and so. And Joanna's name kept coming up in that list. So I remember when I first met her, I was really excited. But to give you a bit of background, I think Joanna is an agricultural economist, but also, I would say, a really strong marketing expert with a background in market research and has worked across Asia, Africa, Europe, and now, I saw from your CV that you had worked within uh, sort of fishing and then gone into things like millets and ICRISAT and now at IRRI. So I think you've spanned the whole, what I wanted to say was you spanned the whole food cycle as well, right? And so across continents and across diverse food types. So I think that you will have so many amazing stories for all of us. But I think in the context of today, what's important to know is that in 2017, she also started the smart food movement. And when you talk about that, I love what you did over there. And it really brought together, if you ask anybody who started their business around the same vintage as I did, in this field of millets, everybody has a Joanna story. And I have many to share, from the incredible kindness you showed us to so much support when we were a germ of an idea. And I just want to say that's what it takes to start a revolution of any sort, of underutilized species or anything. So I wanted to kick off today with that thought, which is that it takes a village, not just to raise a child, but to raise a business. And it's an honor and a privilege to do this with you today.
That's very, very kind words, Shauravi. But it was pretty exciting actually. We both started our journeys at a similar time. You as
Yeah.
an entrepreneur, me as an intrapreneur, but and both of us talking millets and very few other people talking millets. And I remember when I used to go out really knocking on doors, trying to do the advocacy work, I always had the Slurpp Farm millet packets in my hand because your products were excellent taste, all natural, most beautiful design. They always, there's a story behind them, which people will learn today. And then, of course, there were really beautiful people behind it as well. So having your products really helped part of the whole advocacy in getting millets out there globally. And I always appreciated, to me, the real farmers do it really, really hard, but a lot of people forget that the startups and the SMEs do it just as hard. And I was always so inspired by your story and others around that were the early ones in the game. So yeah, so it's an honor for me to be here with you today, Shauravi, and I'm looking forward to listening to your journey. But over to you first.
Okay, so I will share a few slides. I will run through them because I want to keep some of the my story short and enable people to ask their questions. So I'm going to share my screen. And you need to let me know. Can you see my screen? Yeah? Are you able to see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Okay, so welcome. Um, I want to talk to you, before I show you what we did, I want to talk a little bit about what started Slurpp Farm and why, it took being in some way. So India in some way is a very important dilemma because there you have both under and overnourishment, i.e., people are lacking food and people are also, there's excess or obesity, particularly among children. And 90% of children are either protein deficient, some are anemic, and this is across income groups. And part of this is that, grocery aisles are filled with junk. We know this. There's additives, there's preservatives, sugar, salt, refined flour, trans fat, and that's leading to this whole cocktail of disease that we see: cancer, diabetes, obesity. And that's because taste and price have generally won over nutrition. So, from the very start, this notion of having grain diversity or diverse food um, ingredients in what we make was very much a part of what we had at home as a food culture. And it started with this understanding that the first, start of a child, and that's my daughter in the photo, a start of a child's food journey is so important. And they should eat different types of millets, lentils, seeds, legumes. And that, surprisingly, most medical schools have 4 days out of 4 years in the US on food. And we felt that food as medicine needs to be back on the plate. When we started, we didn't start out to do so much millets, but we learned about how good they are. And actually, for both Meghna and me, we had a living history of eating millets in our own homes. And, you know, as you delve back on the sort of back of the pack, as you see over here, it was really mostly wheat, maida, actually very refined wheat, sugar, and salt, right? And traditionally, wheat and rice, and in the US, corn have dominated the plate. But we also understood and learned as we went deeper, and we started in about 2015, 2016, but by 2017, we had understood that there's also not enough water to grow wheat and rice. And millets, as we learned, are A, very good for children, but B, need less water to grow them. And so started this whole, almost in our hearts, right? A way to say we want to bring millets back to the plate, because they're good for the farmer, they're good for the planet, and they're good for you. They're good for anybody who's eating them. It also interestingly started actually from a way where we wanted to be 100% organic food brand. And we could not find traceability of the food chain in some way to enable us to make what we wanted to do. And so we said, you know what, we will use more millets in everything that we make, because they are born organic. They don't need a lot of pesticides or fertilizer to grow, so we're just going to do it this way. And our journey with millets sort of somewhere started in our own grandmother's kitchens. That's Meghna's grandmother, and she, the first sattu mavu recipe, that is one of the cereals that we make, was her recipe. My grandmother, so many of the things, from the ragi dosa to the others, started while having a conversation, right? So in the way that we ate it in our houses, we wanted to bring it across and make it really yummy. I wanted to try and play this video for you if I can. Let me see if it launches. Although maybe I may need Hugo's help. Always a bit difficult. Oh, okay, it could work. Can you hear? Is it loud enough?
That's my grandmother, my party, who is 84 years old and still has the same energy today that she did when I was a little girl. She made sattu mavu for me and my daughter. To me, when I look at that box of sattu mavu, it instantly reminds me of childhood.
Sattu mavu literally means healthy flour. It is a mix of roasted grains and nuts and sometimes spices. At Slurpp Farm, we make it the way my grandmother, my party, made it for me when I was little. So it's ragi, foxtail millet, jowar, dals like moong dal and Bengal gram, brown rice and almond flour.
So our journey with millets really ended up. Sorry, can you still hear me? I'm not sure if I'm in the right part of the Zoom. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, no problem.
Okay, great. Thank you. And really started with finding the answers in our grandmother's kitchens, And we did a recent survey, primarily with millennials and Generation Z, as they are called, to find out that 74.5 or 75% of people had been introduced to millets in their childhood. Um, and our journey with millets also a large part of it, and I want to share this, like to anybody who's looking to start a business which is about an ingredient or a product which is not very familiar to people. I think from day one, we always felt we had to start a movement around it. This is a white paper that we wrote in 2017 because we learned in the first year of
Shauravi, we
launching our
can't
company that
see
when we
your
went.
screen. Shauravi, we can't see your slides.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, you know what happened? When I stopped sharing, um, it went off. Sorry. Is it back?
Yeah, it's back.
Okay,
Good to go.
so this is the survey that we did. And it said basically that people who've eaten them have often eaten them in their childhood. 87% are aware of the benefits, but really it's taste, affordability that stops people from trying them right oftener. And this was the white paper that we wrote in 2017. And I was just explaining that this was for us a way to say, look, you may not have heard about millets, you may not have eaten them, but we're going to tell you a little bit about them. So this white paper actually was the story of how many countries, by the way, not just in India, but in Africa, I learned that in China, in Europe, there is a living history of eating millets and how we have forgotten it, why we have forgotten it. It told stories of people who grew them, but it also told um, it was a way to inform anyone we met, from journalists to people in government to people in retail stores, because when we used to go with the product to keep it, people used to be like, what is that? Right. And so there was almost, because also millets are often seen as bird food or animal feed. So there's like they don't taste yummy sort of association. And I think that one of the things we did was work very hard to overcome this. But then we realized that there are other stakeholders who need to tell the story. And I always tell the story of how this particular white paper, we gave it at 1 year at a certain event, a second year, and a third year. And the fourth year, I was like, no one's reading this. But one of the people in our team persisted and shared it with everybody in that event. That's the year that it got picked up. So it took 4 years of sharing the same document with so many people, some of them multiple times, for people, like they say in marketing, you have to say something 8 times for a consumer to register awareness, not buy, but register awareness. And I think that was the case with much of the messaging. I wanted to share that in India, when we say underutilized species, right, there is a living memory of eating millets. So whereas much of the world today, we are having to explain what is millets again, in many parts of India, people eat um, millets and have always done. So this also shows different lentils and legumes, because in everything that we make, we try to say, just as at home, we eat 4, 5 different types of lentils, we eat some legumes, we eat different types of millets. Our diet should be diverse equally. And this is a little bit of a glimpse into the early years. And we really pounded the pavements. Sometimes we still do, but it was, we used to do different fairs. We used to put up stalls in different cities. I cannot tell you how. I think my real journey of traveling around India in little, really smaller towns started as a result of building this company, from going to see almost hundreds of factories, different people to source from. We've done fairs, and if you name a city, we've done a fair in it. And it was great because we spoke to thousands of consumers, in person. These are some of the stalls we would always put up. Sometimes it would just be Meghna and me at a stall, or just me or just her, and you have no time to even go to the loo because your cash still was there. And that was the first ever food retail fair we did, actually, in 2017. We had only 6 products at the fair, and everybody would come to our stall and be like, why do you have a stall at this fair? You don't really have a lot of products as such. And I think it came also from this sense of, like, even when we were very small, we always had this thing of, we want to change how children eat at scale. And to do that, it was almost as though in 2017 we were still trying to be that company we may be in 2027, right? And then, we did not know it at the time, or certainly it was not anything that we thought would happen. But this 2023 year of millets has been an incredible boost for anybody who has a millet-based business anywhere in the world, right? And I think that the Indian government has really played such an amazing lead role in this global effort to drive adoption of millets. It's really helped small scale companies, new entrepreneurs starting out now in the field of millets, but it's also helped awareness. It's helped people learn and hear about millets in a form that they may never have heard without a year like this, where, there's a photo of the Prime Minister saying, everybody's eating millets, and going to this event where everybody in the parliament ate millets. The budget has made several uh, sort of incentives. So I just think that what it went to from then to now is a full movement around getting awareness around it. And this is something everybody knows, right? Millets are climate smart. They need less water, they need less pesticides, they need very little to grow actually. And this enables food as a sector to be more sustainable at the outset, and building over time enduring relationships with the people who grow what we use and make in the products we make is actually very critical and key to our mission at Wholesome Foods. This is a little bit about the number of tons of we report this every year in our impact report on how much millets we consume, what is the water saved by replacing rice with millets, and water saved by replacing wheat with millets. So this is a nice way to say, this much water got saved, because sometimes when you think about India as a country which exports rice, we're actually exporting our water, right? And with so many states in drought, this is harder and harder to do. I think the other thing that I wanted to share for any entrepreneurs, this is something that we wrote out in 2017 actually, saying if you were to dream, and it felt so far, but it's only 2 years away now, say that if in 2025, what would our company be like? And at that time, and we have 2 brands now, but at that time we had thought we will have 3 brands, that we would be in many different countries in the world, in USA, in Europe, in the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. We had thought we would have 500 different types of products. We would have a direct engagement for fair trade sourcing with farmers. We would have $60 million of revenue per annum, and we'd be 400 to 500 employees. I want to say that we got halfway or more with a lot of these things. We are 2 brands. We sell in a few countries, mostly India, but we sell outside India in a few countries. We're about 150 products between the 2 brands. We're on the cusp of a direct engagement for fair trade sourcing. That's something we spend some time on every year. In terms of revenues and employees, we have gotten, sort of halfway-ish to that number. And so I just want to say that sometimes when you start a company, if on day one it might sound crazy, but put that paper down of where you want to be in 10 years' time. This is a little bit about what we have built so far. And it shows you how, we went from about 200,000 customers in 2020 to about 2.5 million customers estimated from what we sell in 2022-23. And these are just some of there are people who have moms who've talked about us, written about us over the years. And we talk a little bit about, we go where our customers are. How did we do it? And this is stuff I would love to answer any questions if anybody has. But I think from the start, we had this very 360 like thinking on how do we get people to actually know, right? That's the heart of it. You may have the most amazing product, but I would say in the early years, we actually even went and put our products in a lot of stores. It was a big mistake because nobody knew who we were. So it was like a tree falling in a forest. Nobody heard you. No one knows about you. And so I would say over the last 4 or 5 years, our strategy has been that you have to meet the consumer online and offline. So, in the online sector, we talk to our consumer always on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, through different mom bloggers and influencers, through parenting communities, on WhatsApp. And we sell on all these online websites. So Amazon, Big Basket, Reliance, Food Hall, First Cry, Flipkart, Mom's World, our own website. And then we sell in the offline segment on in different retailers, in top retailers in 8 cities that we're in India. We also are available in different play areas. You can see sometimes a little bit of information around us, say at a pop-up or at some school where we'll go and we'll, ask children, say, check out our breakfast cereal, or ask them to get familiar with some of the different things we make. Now we make noodles, so those sort of things that we will chat with school children about directly. But the whole thing is to have this very 360 thinking towards how you get your message out. And I think this is actually one of my favorite slides, because this is a mom who calls herself a Slurpp Farm evangelist, and that's her son. And she's so amazing, because I can never say thank you to her enough. She, on her own initiative, called us up and said, I really like what you guys are doing. Would buy Slurpp Farm from us and sell it in Mizoram, but would do photo shoots on her own, would try to get the word out and get other people to hear about it. And that really is the power of, like, if you build an honest new age business, you will find that the most important tool that you have is that that personal connect. So yes, there's e-commerce and social media, and they have low barriers to entry, but the second thing is actually most important, which is that people who try what you make will be your biggest brand ambassadors, and you are closer. The third thing is that you're closer to the consumer. Even today, every Instagram message or comment, right, or if there's an email and someone's unhappy, I will, at night, my last 1 hour is spent scrolling all our social media comments and feeds and questions. So it's like this I don't have to ask someone always what are people thinking. Of course, I look at research and different metrics, but you'll always have this sense, because there's no 3 layers between you and that information. A little bit about this year, we started a company called Millet, which is a brand for adults. And that's because we found that almost 30% of the customers who called our consumer line who actually had no children. And they were people who liked the pancakes we made. And so we said, let's make an adult brand for them as well. So we have different things here, from the pancake to the cake. We also make different cake mixes. We have protein pasta. And so this actually came from the rise of, like, a greater health consciousness, right? And early adopters have seen the benefits of consuming millets for managing diabetes and lowering glycemic index. These are fitness and health focused consumers. I'm coming towards the end, and I just wanted to quickly tell you, these are my 2 amazing co-founders and dear friends. We're actually 3 parents and 3 friends who started this company. I have known Umang since I was about 4 years old, and I met Meghna around the time I was 20-something in London. And there's a little bit about our backgrounds. We did very different jobs. Umang was always a graphic designer, Meghna was a consultant, and I worked in a bank. And we met and we decided we wanted to do this because we really felt a lack of options for our own children. And when we built this business, we really felt that people, planet, and purpose can coexist, right? And these are 3 of our North Stars, that, we have a commitment to make only products with positive nutrition. It's important to do a business which actually has positive impact on health. We use better for planet grains, and we are plastic neutral. So that is our commitment. And we're trying to be over time carbon neutral over various scopes. And the third one is that we want to contribute to a more socially inclusive world. So currently we have a tie-up where we give 1% of all our revenues to Akshay Patra. And we also support a bunch of other really amazing initiatives, right? To make sure that you're not just fixing the food problem at one end of the spectrum, but trying to ensure equality of good food and access. A quick thing on learnings. I think 3 things I wanted to share as a takeaway. It really does take 10,000 hours till you are the master of anything. Like, people will tell you that it can be done faster, quicker. And that's coming to almost the third point, right? Which is that there are no silver bullets. There really are no silver bullets. So it's like like a bunch of different layers to be peeled, but the best thing that you can do is always to work with and find the best people you know at everything. Because, and that's point number 2, you are going to be doing a new PhD every year. First, I feel like I did a PhD in food and figuring out product and almost undoing how products are made today, right? And food is made today and how people eat. And it's inevitable that we will eat off the shelf. We cannot all grow our food and eat the way maybe our grandparents used to, but we can do a much better job of it. Packaging, how will you think about it? What will you do differently? And you'll have to learn it. It won't close properly, all of that. Sales, you figured all of that out, and then you're like, why are my sales not happening? Got to figure out marketing. Now, in our case, it's figuring out and doing a better job on like fairness of our supply chains, I would say. So every year there is that next thing, and there is no silver bullet, but enjoy the journey because the journey is the destination. A very important part of what we also have is that we were very clear on what our values are. And I just thought I would share that these are our 4 company values. And for anybody who's looking to start a company today, have a think about this and put it out there and live it in every little practice that you do. From hiring, we ask people about these values to we celebrate them, and we have a monthly town hall. And the importance of doing that in any company, in any sector that you may be building. And the last thing is our favorite quote. That most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And that is what keeps most entrepreneurs going. Thank you.
Thanks, Shauravi. That was great and very inspirational. And you've got a whole new fan group now in the chat box. And I can see you've inspired many more.
Oh, see, I haven't read it, but thank you. And over to you, Joanna.
All right, thanks, Shauravi. I just wanted to prove, see, I still have your phone.
Oh.
I'm on the other side of the world and they're here. And they're never away.
Thank you. That made my day.
Yeah. So no, really impressive. So that was great, Shauravi. And what you've done and your team, it's like it is making the world a better place. And it's a career and you can do both together. And I hope then in what I can present now, it shows that people can be an entrepreneur like you, but they can also, if they're within an organization, you can be an intrapreneur, which is really someone who does something entrepreneurial when they're working within an organization. So there's other ways to do it if people are in a different situation. So just going through my story when we started. Oh, I'll share my screen here. Right, I'll check. That's visible, is it?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so
I don't know if it's full screen, Joanna. It's like maybe
isn't it?
bottom is showing somehow. Yeah.
It's full screen for me. Let me just escape and do it again.
No, it's actually cutting off quite a bit of your page.
Okay. Okay, I'll unshare and share again, and then if not, I'll hand over to Hugo to help. Okay, let's see. Right, so I've shared it and I'll go on full screen. Right, does that show it fully now? Oh, you're on mute, Shauravi, here.
No, it doesn't actually. You'll have to, it's
Cutting it
visible,
off?
but it's zooming out.
What if I do it like this? Does this look okay?
It looks fine. It's cutting off the sides.
Oh, really? How How about if
I don't know why that's happening. Maybe
I
yeah,
think I can see it perfectly. I see on the chat that everyone is fine.
okay,
it's
cool.
fine.
Maybe it's
Okay.
just me.
All
Maybe
right.
it's
So
just
it's
on
just,
my end.
yeah. Okay. So Hugo, this is fine at your end.
Yep, perfectly.
Okay. So maybe it's just okay. All right. Sorry about that, Shauravi. Okay. So yeah. So this is more about being an intrapreneur for those who are in a different situation. So this is a story about how we created a global movement around millets. And the first step in the journey was really about finding something that was just so amazing. And it really was a solution that could make a big difference. So when I moved to India, which was about 11 years ago, I'd never heard of millets. I'd never eaten millets. So I was a new convertee. But I worked for an organization where they worked on millets, but many other amazing things they did. And millets received very, very little funding. So I set about trying to learn about, was it worth my while putting any efforts into millets, or should I focus on all the other things that the organization did? And that's where I very quickly came to discover how absolutely amazing millets are. And we termed this phrase, when we looked at the value of it, how they're good for you, so nutritionally valuable, how they're good for the planet, environmentally sustainable, and good for the farmer in that they're highly resilient, they use less water, etc. So they survive in areas where the farmers have almost little other choice. But we then said, however, they're not really good for the farmer unless we can drive demand. And so that really set about sort of our goal was, how can we drive demand for millets? There was lots that needed to be done, but we really saw this was the first step if we really wanted to move this. And when we were driving demand, that didn't just mean consumers, that really was the whole value chain, because we were never going to impact consumers globally. So how else could we impact? So one was working with entrepreneurs and small and medium enterprises, just like Shauravi. I mean, sorry, Shauravi, but you were part of our our strategy that if we didn't support organizations like you and help and understand the needs, that we couldn't have really driven demand. So the SMEs were absolutely at the core of this. And part of the reason was we saw that millets needed to change the image, and Shauravi talked a bit about that. And we saw the best way to do that were to have some modern, convenience, really delicious, tasty, nutritious products on the market. That was going to change it the most. So we looked at how we could support SMEs. We also spent a lot of time with government. So we needed millets to be on the agenda, and they weren't. So we spent a lot of time through advocacy, working with governments. We also targeted researchers because we saw that millets were decades behind the level of research of the other major crops. And we knew eventually we needed to increase yields, we needed support for the farmers, etc. So how could we influence the researchers to take on millets? And then one of the other major target audience for us was development agencies. Because millets were a traditional crop across Africa and Asia, where a lot of development agencies and donors are working, but they weren't working on millets, how could we get millets into their agenda as well? And that took a lot of advocacy. But what we also saw is that if we really wanted to make a big impact, then really we felt that we had to do it through staples, because millets were traditionally a staple across many countries in Africa and Asia. So how could we bring it back as a staple, not just as another niche market? But to do that, really, the biggest challenge that we had was what we called the food system divide. So basically, the big three, the wheat, maize, and rice, had a huge amount of investment over the decades. And that was investment from private industry, investment from government support, from product development, and aid gave a lot towards the big three. So if you invest in something, generally it does well. as it does well, it attracts more investment. And so that cycle goes. So the big three, the wheat, maize, and rice, had very well developed value chains, and they were highly successful. So it makes it very difficult to break through that divide and to bring in another staple. So that was what we saw as the biggest challenge. But we saw that you could really only do that if you focused on just one crop at a time to bring it in. And that's where we saw millets as the area to focus on. And when we started this, just like Shauravi said, it was hard at the beginning. Millets aren't known. Well, we had, we were basically laughed at the beginning to think that we were going to run a global campaign on millets and try to drive demand. People said, you'll never change demand. Even if you could, we don't have the supplies. They just sort of just laughed really at millets. What are you talking about? Something so minor? How could you do something so big? And I had to really encourage my staff a lot during that time when people really just thought this was ridiculous and not possible. And I used to say to my staff that, if you really do want to challenge the thinking, if you really do want to do something big, then of course you're going to be going against the grain. You're going to get people that don't see it and that knock you back for it. So but you really have to believe in your cause, and you really have to have a vision. We had a very clear vision, and we really believed how this was going to be important for people, for the environment, for farmers. And so you do keep going. And of course it was worthwhile in the end. But then came the point, well, how will we go about really popularizing the millets? And, we had the vision, we had the target audience, and how could we bring them back as a staple? Well, first was creating a global movement. We realized, and it didn't start like this. It did grow a little bit sort of slowly, but we realized this was a global movement. We needed to brand it, and we branded it as smart food because we said, well, people had heard of superfood, and superfood was food that's super healthy. But this millets went way past that. It not only was good for you, but good for the planet and the farmer. And so we termed that as smart food. And what we saw that there were two really critical components to take a global movement forward. One was having scientific evidence, and the other was having the advocacy and marketing. And we really needed both. So we focused on both equally. So what I'll do now is I'll just show a number of examples of science evidence that we worked on and some examples of advocacy and marketing, but I'll just go through them quickly just for the sake of time. So scientific evidence, just like Shauravi, they did their white paper. So we had many versions of the similar white paper where we looked at what's the scientific evidence behind how millets are good for you, good for the planet, good for the farmer. And, we've continued. Actually, the latest release just came out this month where we had huge studies behind it now and really strong. And I won't go through it, but if anyone's looking at millets, these are examples of different ways you can target your product of the value of millets, that we have strong scientific backing now. We did the first scientific-based school feeding study on millets. That was in India, and we did the second, and that was in Tanzania. So it was really important not just to feed it, but to get the data behind it, where we showed in the Indian study that the children fed the millet-based meals compared to the control groups had 50% faster growth. And we did a lot of sensory evaluations too, and they all absolutely loved the taste of the millet-based foods. We did the largest consumer survey ever undertaken on millet. So we did 15,500 face-to-face interviews across 7 cities in India and published that. But just a few insights there. So the biggest reason why people ate millets was, I have a health problem. So the lesson from that is that the early adopters are the people who were looking for millets. They had a health problem. They might have had diabetes or something else. And they were the easiest target to reach. Then we asked people, why do you not eat more millets, or why do you not eat millets? And the number one reason was no one else in the home eats it. So what we saw at the potential there, if you could target the right person who was influencing what was eaten at home, then you've got a multiplier effect. We also showed that 90% of interviewees were reasonably or very health conscious. Now, we were doing this in shopping centres, so an upper level sort of market, but only 40% were sure that millets were healthy. So there was potential for growth even just through awareness. And then we asked people where they get their information about health and foods. Of course, social sources come through really strong, and that's social media as well as friends and family. So that helps show where might be some of the most effective marketing for people who wanted to move into a business side or the advocacy side. So that was more on some of the science. I mean, we did a lot more, but just a flavor of some of the work that had to be done, which backed us in our messaging, which was critical. So then our messaging was in the advocacy and marketing. Again, we did a huge range. We had ambassadors, we had a first lady, we had chefs. Then we did a lot of branding and messaging. We, just like Shauravi, went to many, many, many different trade fairs. We gave so many presentations, so many webinars, went to so many conferences, had so many workshops because it was about people having to understand and learn a lot about this. We did a lot of media coverage. We did a lot of advocacy to policymakers, and we've got great examples where it directly influenced policy. We were pretty excited about that. Millet fairs, we started the first WhatsApp group and network for millets. We had a high-level steering committee and many other activities. What was exciting, in 2017, USAID and Australian government ran a competition, and we won in the top 10 global food innovations. So that was pretty exciting, and that also helped us sort of leverage getting more attention and influencing more. And the last point on this page that I think was the deal breaker in really helping turn things around, which we started years ago, and what we did is we were having an event at FAO at one of their big events. We had a side event, and I asked one of the ministers of agriculture from India to come with us and speak. And he was very, very dynamic and charismatic minister and a huge believer in millets. So because I had him with me, I had any door open to me at FAO. So we made meetings with almost every department in FAO, and we went and talked about how could you have an international year of millets. We visited the Indian embassy in Rome. We came back, we wrote the proposal for the government of India, because only a country can request an international year. And then one of our people in Delhi then walked this through the government, got them involved. The Indian government were just so excited. They were amazing, and they used our presentation even then for when they presented to Rome to get this approved. But then it was the Indian government got behind it. They ran it. I think they've done the best job any country has ever done in any international year. It's anyone who's in India will have seen the amazing work of what the government of India has done, which is just absolutely outstanding. And I think that made just that one effort to get that one activity going is really, really made a big difference. A long way to go, of course, a very long way. But I think that really helped with the global movement. Just a couple of other things at the end. I think Hugo's will just play one, and if we've got time, two very short videos. So in Kenya, we ran a reality TV show. So it attracted a lot of youth, and the typical cooking show and the chefs making decisions. And we also had in India the very first chefs competition across India with all the student chefs, and we made that into a series as well. Now, just really quickly, just a few product stories. So I mean, in India, of course, it's the biggest range of millet products, and you could go for slides and slides and slides showing them. And of course, Slurpp Farm is always in my slides, some of the best products. But just to show just a few examples, there's many more, but just to show that there are millet products around the world. Here's an example from Australia where they pre-cook a variety of different grains, including millets. In Germany, where they have a foxtail porridge, and I love this pear, apple, and millet sort of mixture. Even France, quinoa and millet. Hungary, organic millet balls. I've eaten all of these too. I've been to these countries and tasted all their products. Nigeria uses sorghum to make their Milo drink. We've got this, and there's different millet milk and milk powder that's on the market. Now, here's a story. This is from Australia, where they wanted to create a gluten-free wheat bix. And they tested all the gluten-free grains, and they found that sorghum acted similar enough to wheat that they didn't have to change their equipment, and it was there locally available. So they created this wheat bix, and the top one there, the red one, is 96% sorghum, no wheat at all, of course. Now, at the beginning, they didn't even mention sorghum on the packet. So I asked the company, why haven't you written sorghum there? And they said, well, no one knows what sorghum is. The consumers don't know, so it didn't add any consumer value, so we didn't want to write it. But now it's true, the consumers didn't know much about sorghum, but problem is it's a bit defeatist, and it's very difficult to build the market if we hide the fact that something's sorghum. But that's a challenge that's difficult, but we have to take that on. This is another example in Australia where these are usually used as like an alternative to bread, and they're usually made with rice, and you puff the rice and you make these really lovely little crispy little sort of rice snacks, or thins they call them. Now they decided to bring it out with sorghum, and then they advertised it and they put sorghum on the packaging. Didn't sell at all. So then they changed the packaging and put ancient grains, and sales took off like crazy. It was really popular. So it just shows a challenge we have, and it's not, and because of the the consumer awareness there. Here's another example from West Africa, where Nestle brought out their usual Cerelac, which is usually made with wheat, and they decided to use pearl millet because wheat had to be imported. It's very expensive. The pearl millet is grown low, a traditional staple there, and it's super high in iron and zinc, which is what they wanted as well. So it seemed like a no-brainer. They brought out their product, and they had really negative feedback and pushback from the consumers. Now, I don't actually think it was the babies. I think it was the parents, and it was just the thinking that wheat is imported, it must be superior, you're giving us an inferior product. But Nestle said they were going to stick at it, and they were going to, really try to win the consumer market over. And of course, Nestle has more marketing budget behind them to be able to do something like that as well. But again, the big companies come across that same challenge. And I just threw up this. This is an example of a company in the UK that does sorghum snacks. Now, where they started from is they'd done some research to show that now the majority of people, especially in the poorer socioeconomic areas, were eating more food through snacks than normal meals. They rarely sat down and had a proper meal together with the family. It was all snacking. And of course, very unhealthy snacking. So they had the aim to try to bring out a healthy snack that could be affordable to the lower socioeconomic groups. And they worked with the government as well to try to get some government funding to bring these out to target those lower socioeconomic groups with a healthy snack. And the branding was really fun, and they're still promoting that it's nutritious, but it's delicious as well. And then they promote some of the health benefits. So I just thought it's a great example of another angle, but a company just like Shauravi's who have a real value system behind what they want to do. And if you're starting markets, millet sort of products, there's many different markets, both health markets and different sustainability markets you can always target, because you can't target being everything. And there's a number of there, and they're markets that are really, really growing as well. So that's it. The picture there is the first coffee table book we did quite a few years ago on millets as well, the millet movement. But if there's time, Hugo, even just playing one video is enough. It's less than a minute. And so I'll stop sharing so that you can do that. So the African video, if you can. Yeah.
Welcome to the Smart Food Show, where we eat food which are good for you, good for the planet, and good for the farmer.
I come in as a mentor. It's very hectic.
So what I already expect from the contestants is something new, something different.
I would be the kind of judge that really inspires. We can't escape that.
Who will the ultimate prize go to?
Someone has to go home for me to win.
The Smart Food Show.
Okay, thanks, Hugo. So, Shauravi, I think, Hugo, you're going to take over? Yeah, great.
Yes. So there's already a number of questions. I see we're already 3 minutes away from, let's say, the 60-minute time. If that's fine with people, please message in the chat if it's okay for you to extend, let's say, for 5-10 minutes. Just so that we have time for a couple of questions. Again, feel free to ask your questions in the chat and we'll take them directly. So yeah, we already have a number of questions. Maybe I can start saying some of them. So there's already one from Stella Aber, which is maybe a question for Shauravi and Joanna. She wants to showcase millet flour and was wondering how to best brand and packaging. So maybe that's one for, do you want a couple of questions and then, okay. So there's also a question from Kelvine Munane. Maybe this one could be for Joanna. What are some of the bottlenecks for millet to get into the EU? How do you manage direct link to consumers? Maybe an additional one for Shauravi from Akena Deo Desire. What varieties are you using? Should the millet always be in combination with other grains? And yes, so that's basically some of the questions. Again, feel free to put them in the chat for participants. And Joanna and Shauravi, over to you.
Right. Okay, I'll go first. Shauravi hasn't gone on. I'll let Shauravi answer then the millet flour, since she's right up her alley. Just on the EU, I just have one interesting example. I mean, that's a big question. How do you enter the EU? But I have an example of a company that were making millet cookies and other products, millet flour as well, and they wanted to export from India to the EU. And they started that, and then they found for them, and every company's different, it was more cost effective to actually work with farmers in the EU, grow the millets, because millets are grown in Eastern Europe, and then work with them on developing the products there. Then you're already in the EU, you set up, you get a good partnership. But that's just one example. Not everyone's going to do that. But yes, the EU has the advantage that there is already a lot of awareness around whole grains, around healthy natural foods, but just like any product, there's a huge process to go through to export, and you could maybe you go through traders or you get a partner. There's many different ways. Yep. But over to Shauravi for the other questions.
Sure. The question on how do you market millet flour, I would say I don't know which millet in particular that you're talking about, but in terms of getting people to try eating millet, and that almost always means replacing something that they currently eat, right, with that millet. The best way we have found is always a lot of recipes and ideas and providing inspiration to people on how you want them to use what you're making. Um, I think the other thing is when you're thinking about the packaging and branding, think about what your USP could be, because there are so many large companies who are also going to be in the field of millets. And if it's just the flour, then you either have to say, maybe I can sell in this radius to these many people, and that's great. Or if I want to do it at scale, then I have to think about what is my USP, what makes me different or stand out from somebody who might be making another type of millet flour, So you can call it a pancake or a dosa, but your recipe should go up that one level. So really think where on the spectrum of flour you want to play. Joanna answered the EU question. The third question was what varieties. We primarily work with 3 millets. We work with foxtail millet, we work with finger millet, which is ragi, and we work with jowar, which is sorghum. So those are the 3 we use. We do a little bit now of little millet as well, but we really primarily work with these 3 millets. And that's because they are easy to source all around the year, and they are subject to lesser price. Some of the minor millets have far greater price fluctuations in the course of the year. And so, and because as a company you have to, in India, your selling price is fixed. It has to be printed on the back of your pack. So we can't fluctuate and vary with that. The third thing that you said was, does it always have to be in combination with other grains? Not really, no. We sometimes add lentils because they are plant protein and they are, it's good to eat lentils and legumes in your diet. But you can eat millets on their own. I think the one thing to caution about is that you cannot eat the same millet again and again and every day the way you might eat rice. But it's great to switch it up and have different types and diversity in your in what you eat.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So we already have a number of questions that are coming in. So Zdravka Dimitrova, maybe a question for both of you. What do you think should be the way forward after the International Year of Millet? So that took place in 2023. What is needed from your perspective to be further developing the millet sector? That's a big one. And then we also have a question from Suresh Kumar about how about keeping quality in millets, specifically pearl millet flour and presence of tannins. So that's maybe a question.
What did you say? Pearl millet flour
and presence of tannins. So maybe both, really up to you as to who wants to pick this one. And then we also have a final question from Yusaina Bashir, maybe a question to Joanna on this one. How can our food processing company incorporate millet into a staple in West Africa? So over to you two.
All right, Shauravi's writing it all down, so yeah. I'll just go ahead first. All right. Okay. I'll take, so for the one about just further development that's needed, from the perspective of India at the moment, I think a lot's been done to drive demand and awareness, even though a lot more is needed. I actually believe, and so do many others, the next big step India needs is actually looking at the yield with the farmers, because there's a lot of products there now on the market, but production hasn't actually really been going up a lot. Yield has actually been doing quite well, but it's still way behind where other crops are because there's been less research comparatively to other crops. And unless we make it really viable for the farmer, it's not going to take off. So I do feel that the next big step for India is to make leaps and bounds of improvement of working at the farmer end to make it really viable for the farmer. Not that everything else isn't needed. The point on the tannins, so that's one of the anti-nutrients that are in millets that are actually in all crops, all foods, so we've looked at that. Millets do not have any higher level of anti-nutrients necessarily than other crops. There's been studies looking at, for example, the bioavailability of iron from millets, showing that it's good bioavailability, same as there's studies showing the bioavailability of calcium from finger millet. Milk bioavailability is about 31%, finger millet is about 29%, so it's almost the same. And what's also been shown is that almost all of the forms of processing, now we're not necessarily talking ultra processing here, but just normal processing, does break down the anti-nutrients and helps with the bioavailability significantly, actually. So I don't think it's a big concern. And of course, some of those anti-nutrients also are actually anti-cancer factors as well. So there also has some positive sides. Okay, there's a few things. Maybe over to you, Shauravi.
So on the way forward after International Year of Millets, I completely agree with what you said, Joanna. I think that that momentum shouldn't get lost. I think the momentum should cover all parts of the food chain. So not just, companies like us at the end, but through all of it. I do think one other thing, that we should be careful not to build a millet meta. And so it's incumbent on companies like us to not make junk food out of millets, because that association of millets shouldn't be lost. And I think equally it's incumbent on the early part of the food chain to not start to grow millets with pesticides and fertilizers, which I was told has started happening in certain belts, especially with ragi. And so I wonder how can we do it better this time, really, right? And that just means fewer diseases, less cancer, less obesity. So can we think about the end outcome at the beginning versus coming to recycling and things like that later down the chain? I realize that's a big ask, but I do think that with the right intentions, it can get there. What is needed to further develop the millet sector? I think that a lot of those movements are in play in India, and I think this conversation actually has a lot of people from all over the world, and I think that's what's really inspiring, right? I saw many people saying, I'm from XYZ country in Africa. I saw different other countries as well. I think that what is needed somewhere is a better global cooperation. And thank you to the FAO for organizing calls like this, because there's a lot of information on recipes, on knowledge, on what works, what doesn't work. And I'll answer some of that in my next question, which can be shared, and it could maybe save time. There's a lot of things we learned very painfully. And so some of these forums are where you get something, right? So if you have something that's bothering you, maybe now's a good time to ask. The other thing is that you asked on the quality of pearl millet flour and tannins. I actually wanted to say that pearl millet is one of the millets I found hardest to cook with. And it's why we didn't choose it as one of the millets that we make recipes with, because although it's extremely nutritious, it's I would say it is at the second stage of getting people habituated to eat millets in some way. So I know Joanna answered some of the questions around anti-nutrients. I'll let that stay where it is. And the fourth one was on food processing of millets as staples, right? Did I get the question right? It was asking, how can you make millet staples successful? I think that there's and we think about that a lot, because we didn't do it with Slurpp Farm, but with Millet, the second brand, it really was, we felt the right time for people to take millets to the center of the plate. So we felt with Slurpp Farm, you're, yes, in the child's life, but we were playing in different occasions, breakfast and snack time. One is recipes. It always works. People need inspiration on how they can eat it in place of rice. how can they cook it? It does take a little bit longer to cook. So, precise instructions. It's almost like tell people, now everybody knows how to cook rice like from the back of their head, right? So till you habituate people into how to do something, it takes a little bit of time. And thinking about ways to make it yummy, recipes, always help. So just never give up. People need almost like a New York Times of food level of inspiration about what to do with millets every day. Yeah.
Actually, I'll add to that, Shauravi, because I think the last question, I think they asked specifically in West Africa as well, but I think your answers still apply, because I would say we could learn a lot from what we went through in India for West Africa too, where in India, initially millets sort of had a bit of a negative image, old-fashioned food or food for the poorer people. And so in West Africa, there's some of that as well. So it's about changing the image, making a buzz around it, having really delicious, lovely products on the market. I think that's what made a big difference in India as well, and could be the same in West Africa too. But there were just some thoughts that replicate what you're saying. Yeah.
Fantastic. I see we're already 10 minutes away, so maybe one final question from...
I'm happy to stay longer, by the way. No problem.
Okay, well, feel free to continue then asking questions in the chat if you want to. I only see basically one from Vaishnavi Kanangav. Maybe a question for the both of you. How would you ensure the trickle-down effect of profits for the millet farmers as a commercial business?
I'm happy if you want to go to further, Shauravi, but I know we looked for a while there at how we could connect the farmer closer to the processor. The challenge was, at the time, the companies coming into millets were more like startup companies. And until you've got scale, it's very hard for them to buy direct from farmer and then engage and ensure the farmer's got, the best sort of pricing structure. So that made it challenging. When big companies get into it, it's a bit easier. We were trying at one stage to even see how you could group SMEs geographically to be able to purchase direct from farm. But of course, India has the advantage of having FPOs, farmer producer organizations, and with the government support, they can help with ensuring the aggregation helps with getting a slightly better price. But I think there's a lot that needs to be done with this. And this isn't really just an issue of millets. This is agriculture generally has a challenge of how the farmers get a fair price. But Shauravi, you might want to add to that.
I think it's a very complex question. I definitely think that it's something we have committed to spending, it's not even the next year or two, the next 5 to 10 years to figuring out. Because I always thought that if you buy direct from an FPO or a farmer, they would get the benefit of what you buy, what you pay the middleman versus what they sell at. But it's not that easy. And that was my learning. And actually, if there's anybody on this call who has, this is almost my next PhD, as I say, right? And if you have any insight onto one part of this, please do share it, because I think we can build a model across countries and across continents, really, to make it right in that sense. Because there is a cost of transportation, there is a cost of storage. And because the average farmholder size is very small, it's half a hectare, very often people grow millets for their primary use. They don't want to sell. So, and they're living not even a subsistence wage, actually, they're growing to eat. So an intervention at that level requires going and thinking about collectivizing a group of people together to increase yield, to provide solutions around storage and distribution, and to take a very patient long-term view. And the most, like, when I explain the problem, the first answer is, oh, it's very difficult because you might buy millet from person A this year and person B next year. So you have to solve that. That's the problem you're trying to solve, which is in a commitment to one group of people year on year, and a commitment to see value and growth together, right? So as your company grows, that community or that person should grow. There are no easy answers. I put my hand up and say that, and I would love to solve this. It's almost like a personal. So I don't want to food stamp and say, oh, we source from 5,000 farmers directly. Yay. Did I make their life better? Because if they're at the same, whether they source to me or sell to the middleman, if they're at the same level, then there's no benefit to doing that. So really the number of the question is, did I make it better? I can't say that I know that answer today, and I really, really, really would love to solve it. So, feel free to share any expertise you may have in that.
Perfect. I'm looking at the chat, but I think there was no more questions. I think you were too good to respond to all of them. Thank you so much, honestly, to the both of you, both Shauravi and Joanna, in regard to taking the time, the extra time to respond to everyone. I think we covered everything. It's been truly a tremendous journey, and I think both the presentations were really personal, and I think it spoke to most people. I mean, I see 108 participants still after 17 minutes beyond time. So thank you to the both of you. I saw a number of questions in regard to whether or not the recordings will be available. They will be available. The presentations will be sent also to all the registered participants. I will quickly just share my screen because basically this is part of the World Food Forum Masterclass, which really aims to provide youth and participants with the necessary knowledge, skills, and confidence to get into the workforce. So this masterclass is really part of a broader, let's say, movement from the World Food Forum to really help gain skills. And so they released last month a youth skills hub, which compiles online courses, masterclasses, career opportunities to put those knowledge into practice. And I think it's definitely a one-stop shop that is definitely of interest. And if you're interested in those topics, I really encourage all participants to take a look at what's available there. And yes, until next time, basically. So thank you once again. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Shauravi. Thank you to all the participants for logging in and for staying extra time. And we'll send you the recording of this very soon. Thank you very much, everyone.